guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Josie and today we're talking about how to grow a big, beautiful and bushy Hoya Linearis. I don't have a lot of things in my life to flex about, but you gotta admit, my Hoya Linearis is definitely one of them. Because look at this beautiful, luscious babe. We're gonna cover the basics such as the light watering, the soil. We're also gonna cover propagation, and we're gonna talk about the blooms a little bit as well. So let's get started. I got mine as a potted plant. I got it in, I think it was May last year. So almost a year ago now, actually. This is what it looked like when I first got it. As you can tell, she's grown significantly compared to what she looks like now. And yeah, she's been a happy hippo. All right, let's talk about the growing medium. I grow my Hoya Linearis in soil. It is actually the soil mix that it came in when I first bought it. I didn't change it anything. It's a very peat heavy soil mix. There's literally like no drainage components in there whatsoever. The takeaway from that is basically anything you put it in, it should be okay. I would maybe recommend something a little bit more on the chunkier side because it is still a Hoya, and this Hoya in particular is an epiphyte, which means it likes to grow on trees. And what do trees have? They have bark, that's right. So I think if you want to provide a little bit of natural environment for your Hoya Linearis, maybe mix a little bit of orchid bark in there. But like I said, I grow mine in a very peat heavy mix, and as you can see, it's really happy. So if you already have it potted up in something and you're wondering if you should repot it into something better, you don't necessarily have to. As for alternative growing mediums, you can definitely grow these in pond and leca as well. I think soil is the best one for this type of plant because honestly, depending on how you're gonna grow your Hoya Linearis, to be honest, mine is composed of a lot, and I mean a lot, of cuttings that are kind of plugged in there, which is easy to do with soil, but with a substrate like leca or pond, that's not really that easy. If you are gonna plant it in pond, I would definitely make sure that you treat the pond as soil. That means to let it dry out before each watering, just because Hoyas in general, they can retain moisture pretty well, and root rot is one of the issues that Hoya Linearis gets a lot. So to prevent that from happening, avoid just keeping it in water all the time. As for support, so as I already mentioned, this Hoya is an epiphyte. It likes to grow on trees, and naturally in its natural habitat, it actually grows downwards from a tree. So there is no need to trellis it up. I don't think I've ever seen anyone have a trellised Hoya Linearis, honestly. I'm gonna try to look up any pictures and see what that looks like because I have a feeling it would look kind of funny. Anyway, there's no need to trellis it. As you can see, this one is trailing down and it is growing very, very happily. And the last thing I'm gonna say is that similar to all other Hoyas, there's no need to repot this plant very often. Hoyas have pretty fine root systems and they don't mind being root bound for a long period of time. Like I said, I haven't really repotted mine since I got it, and I'm not planning on doing so anytime soon, really. I am probably gonna repot it once I notice that it's starting to decline, or once the soil starts feeling like it's drying out way too quickly, but for now it's happy in this pot, so I'm not gonna disturb it. I'm just gonna let it live its best Hoya Linearis life. Alright, let's talk about light conditions. So this might be a controversial opinion, but I think that Hoya Linearis likes a lot of light. A lot of light. When I first got her, I was growing her in my conservatory, which was basically sun coming in from 1, 2, 3, 4 angles, and it was like bright direct sun on top of the plant, and it was enjoying it very much. After a longer period of time, I did notice that the leaves were starting to look a little bit bleached, so I would definitely recommend not having it in direct sunlight for too much time during the day, but I would say that maybe 5 hours tops would be okay. Point is, I would definitely not be scared of direct sunlight because it was growing so happy in there. I'm gonna show you a comparison of when I first got it and a couple months after that, how much it had grown in that period of time. So you can definitely see that it was really enjoying the sunlight it was getting. Right now, it's not really growing season yet. It's April, but I have my Hoya Linearis growing in a west-facing window. So again, it gets some direct sunlight, definitely not as much as it used to in the conservatory, but it does get some direct sunlight. So I would definitely opt to put it in a brighter window rather than a darker window, especially at the top. I mean, that's a rule with any plant, but if you don't give it a lot of light at the top, it's obviously not gonna grow at the top, so you might have some falling leaves around the base. But if you do provide it with enough light at the base, then you're gonna get a lot of new growth, where the original stems are just basically gonna double, and you're gonna have new growth points that are just gonna try to run away and make a life on their own as a happy little independent Hoya Linearis vine. One indication that you're definitely not giving your Hoya enough light is scraggly growth. So this would be a perfect example of that. This grew during the winter, and also, like I said, dropping leaves or not enough foliage around the base. So if you notice that your Hoya is doing that, maybe just give it some supplemental light if you can. Okay, watering. I would definitely recommend keeping this plant in a plastic pot, or at least a glazed, non-porous ceramic pot if you can, because these are thirsty girls, okay? This is one thirsty girl, this one. Even though it's a Hoya, it can somewhat tolerate drought, but it definitely doesn't like to stay dry for too long. A good indication, if you like to look out for physical signs, is that when your Hoya Linearis is thirsty, the needles are going to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more bendable. Otherwise, you can just, you know, do the typical poke your finger in there to see if it needs to be watered or not. I water mine when it's completely dry throughout. I water it when the pot feels really light, and then I just drench it in the shower and hang it up and put it back into its spot. I would definitely recommend not to let them go dry for too long. Ideally, what you would want to do is let it dry out completely, but the minute it dries out completely, water it then, because like I said, they don't like to be dry for too long. And you know, typically Hoyas can preserve water a lot because of their waxy leaves, but these are waxy leaves, but because they're not as big, they don't really have that much space to store the water in them. So naturally it makes sense that it's gonna be a bit more of a thirstier plant. And speaking of watering, as for humidity, I haven't noticed this Hoya needing any special humidity levels. I've always had it growing in ambient humidity, but to be fair, ambient humidity for me right now is 43%. So if you notice that your Hoya isn't growing as much, then maybe it might be due to humidity, but I would say that in a regular environment it should be fine. Unless you live in like the desert or something, then maybe it will not be as fine. As for pests, this is definitely one of the Hoyas that is very, very prone to mealybug attacks. Not especially because it's yummy to mealybugs, but just because there are so many hiding spaces in this little plant. If you do spot a mealybug on one of these, then be on top of keeping those at bay, because they can spread really easily and it's gonna take you forever to remove them, especially if you have a full plant like this one. So let's talk about the flowers. So Hoya Linearis has a beautiful little, I would say light, very light yellow / white flowers. I haven't personally registered a specific scent to the flowers, but some people say that they just smell floral. I don't really know. You can usually expect flower growth in autumn time or fall time. Usually, I think for me it was in October when it bloomed. If you want to encourage flowering, definitely make sure that you fertilize your Hoya, because if it doesn't have nutrients, it's not gonna want to flower. Okay, lastly, let's talk about Hoya Linearis propagation. So I think propagation is the main reason why my Hoya Linearis is so bushy, because a couple months ago I did a video on Hoya Linearis propagation, which you can check out over here if you want to see the whole thing, but I'm gonna basically summarize it here. Anyway, when I made that video, all of the propagations that I made from that I stuck back into the soil over here, and that basically caused a huge growth spurt, and now she's a beautiful bushy gal. So if you want to make your Hoya Linearis bushy, propagation is definitely one of the best ways. First of all, obviously if you plant it back into the pot, it's gonna cause more growth points that way, but also cutting repotting, the plant is gonna encourage more growth on the stem that you cut. So I would definitely not be scared of Hoya Linearis propagation. It's definitely gonna be needed from time to time. I am definitely gonna chop this little scraggly boy and propagate that one and plop him back, because this is just, what is this? As I mentioned, I have a full video on different propagation methods when it comes to Hoya Linearis, but in summary, if you want to propagate Hoya Linearis, you pretty much propagate it like any different Hoya. You cut it between the nodes over here and then you stick it into your propagation medium of choice. You do not have to make sure that the cutting has a node in the substrate, because it is a Hoya, it will root out of anywhere, but I have found with Hoya Linearis that it definitely helps to have a node in the substrate so that the plant can grow roots out of it. So I would say cuttings that are about this size would be ideal, where you would cut off the bottom 2 leaves and then plop that node into your propagation medium, and hopefully it's gonna root from there on. One interesting thing about Hoya Linearis is that you can actually propagate wet sticks too. I managed to do that successfully even. It definitely takes a little bit more time and the success rate isn't as good, but if you've got a lot of these situations going on and you really want to make a full bushy Hoya Linearis and you don't want to throw this out, then by all means give it a try. You know, you might succeed, you never know. When you're propagating Hoya Linearis, I would say that it is absolutely essential not to let the substrate dry out when you're propagating, because the propagations definitely need to be submerged in moist substrate all the time to encourage rooting, especially during the first couple of weeks when there's not that many roots or not any roots at all. And as for the best propagation medium, soil is generally really good for propagation. That is either if you make a cutting and put it into a separate pot of soil, or if you just stick it back into the soil here. But do remember what I said about keeping the soil moist. Pon is also really good if you're a pon gal, or leca. I didn't have pretty much any luck with water. I also tried sphagnum moss and I wasn't super pleased by that either, but it ultimately really comes down to preference. I would say if you want like a really good chance, I would definitely choose soil or pon. If you want to know about the hierarchy, I wrote it down here. So basically the best for propagation is pon, then soil, then leca, then perlite, then sphagnum moss, and then water. So yeah, do with that information what you will. Hopefully you'll find something that works for you, but I definitely stand by soil and pon the most. So yeah, I think that's about it for caring for this beautiful luscious babe. I hope you found this information very useful. Remember that I have a houseplant channel full of houseplant stuff, so if you want to stick around, make sure you're subscribed. You can follow me on Instagram, where I post literally never anymore, but I'll try to get back on that, I promise. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment down below, all of that good stuff, and yeah, maybe I'll see you here for my next video. Bye!